Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we start today's case, I want to ask for your support by subscribing to my channel. Your support is very important to me, so please subscribe to follow more cases and encourage us. Click the like button and let's get into the case. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered dock of Island Divers, a small dive operation in Key Largo. The wooden planks, bleached grey from years of salt and sun, creaked beneath Marcus Reeves's boots as he hauled his gear toward the waiting boat. At 42, Marcus had logged over 3,000 dives across every ocean on the planet, but the Florida Keys still held a special place in his heart. It was where he'd earned his first certification 20 years ago, where he'd proposed to his now ex-wife Emma, and where he returned whenever life on the mainland became too complicated. "Morning, sunshine," called Captain Rick Donovan from the helm of the Seaseeker, a 36-foot dive boat that had seen better days. "You're the last one. Almost thought you weren't going to make it." Marcus offered a tired smile and handed his tanks to one of the crew members. "Sorry about that, alarm didn't go off." It was a lie. The truth was he'd been up most of the night thinking about Emma's voicemail. After 3 years of silence, she'd called to say she was getting remarried. He wasn't sure why that bothered him so much, but it had cost him several hours of sleep. "Well, you're here now," Rick said, checking his watch, "and we've got perfect conditions for the Blue." The Florida Blue Hole was a natural sinkhole about 12 miles offshore, hidden beneath the surface of the Atlantic. Unlike its more famous cousin in Belize, Florida's Blue Hole wasn't as well known outside of diving circles. It dropped to nearly 250 feet at its deepest point, and its narrow entrance made it a technical challenge even for experienced divers. Today would be Marcus's 5th time diving it, but his first in almost 2 years. As Marcus stowed his gear, he nodded to the other divers already aboard, a mixed group of 8 ranging from what looked like recreational vacation divers to a few serious-looking technical divers with rebreathers and multiple stage bottles. A few introduced themselves: a father-son pair from Pennsylvania named Jim and Tyler, a couple from California, Sophia and Michael, and a group of friends who appeared to be local technical divers. Among them was Dr. Alicia Chen, a marine biologist Marcus recognized from a documentary series on ocean conservation. Dressed in a worn wetsuit with University of Miami Marine Science printed on the sleeve, she was busy calibrating what looked like scientific equipment. "Dr. Chen," Marcus said, extending his hand. "Marcus Reeves, I've seen your work on shark migration patterns. Impressive stuff." She smiled, shaking his hand firmly. "Thanks, and please call me Alicia. Are you diving the Blue today?" "That's the plan." "Well, you picked a good day for it. Water's exceptionally clear, and we've had some interesting activity in the area lately." "Activity?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Nothing to worry about," she assured him. "Just some unusual migration patterns. That's actually why I'm here. We've been tracking a tagged bull shark that's been hanging around this area for the past month. It's unusual behavior for this time of year." The boat's engines rumbled to life before Marcus could ask more questions. Captain Rick's voice crackled over the small PA system. "All right, folks, we're heading out. ETA to the Blue Hole is about 45 minutes. Weather's perfect. Water temp is 78 degrees. Visibility should be around 80 feet. If you haven't already, start setting up your gear and pairing up with your buddy." Marcus frowned. He hadn't arranged for a buddy beforehand, assuming he'd be paired with someone on the boat. As if reading his mind, Alicia gestured to her equipment. "Looks like you're solo," she observed. "Want to pair up? Fair warning though, I'll be stopping at various points to collect data, so if you're looking to just enjoy the dive." "No, that's perfect actually," Marcus said. "I'd love to see your work up close." The Seaseeker cut through the calm morning waters, leaving the mangrove-lined shore of Key Largo behind. As they motored toward the horizon, Marcus finished assembling his gear, a standard back-mounted twin set, with an aluminum 80 cubic foot stage bottle for additional gas. His primary regulator was a Scuba Pro MK25 he'd had for nearly a decade, reliable, familiar, and serviced religiously every 6 months. He ran through his pre-dive checklist methodically, a routine that had become almost meditative over the years. Alicia worked beside him, her movements equally precise as she prepped her equipment and scientific tools, a small underwater tablet for data collection, a specialized camera system, and what looked like some kind of acoustic monitoring device. "You said there's a bull shark in the area?" Marcus asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Yes, a female, about 9 feet long. "We named her Matilda," Alicia replied, checking the pressure on her primary tank. "We tagged her off the coast of Jupiter last year, and she's been exhibiting some unusual territorial behavior. Bull sharks typically don't stay in one area for this long. Should we be concerned?" Alicia shook her head. Bull sharks can be aggressive, but unprovoked attacks are actually quite rare, as long as we maintain awareness and don't do anything stupid, like spearfishing, we should be fine. The boat slowed as Captain Rick announced they were approaching the dive site. The crew began deploying surface marker buoys to indicate the location of the blue hole, which wasn't visible from the surface except as a slightly darker patch, fauve blue in the otherwise turquoise water. "All right, divers," Rick called out. "Currents minimal today, but remember, the blue hole has its own thermoclines and potential downcurrents. Maximum depth for recreational divers is 130 feet. Technical divers, you know your limits. We'll have a safety diver stationed at 15 feet during the ascent window. Any questions?" When no one spoke up, Rick continued. "We'll be here for 3 hours. First group enters in 10 minutes. Be sure to check your gear one last time and don't forget to log your dive plan with Diego before you go in." Diego, the safety diver, was a serious young man with a clipboard who took down each team's intended maximum depth, bottom time, and gas supply. When it was Marcus and Alicia's turn, she explained they'd be making multiple stops for her research. "We'll max at 180 feet, she told Diego, "but spend most of our time between 90 and 130 feet, planning for 25 minutes of bottom time with standard decompression stops." Diego nodded, making notes. "And you?" he asked Marcus. "Same plan," Marcus confirmed. "I'll be assisting Dr. Chen." Once logged, they moved to the stern of the boat, where divers were already beginning to enter the water. The couple from California went first, followed by the father and son, and then 2 of the technical divers. Marcus watched as they disappeared beneath the surface, the water closing over them like a liquid sky. "Ready?" Alicia asked, securing her mask. Marcus nodded, performing a final check of his equipment. He turned on his primary dive light, a powerful 1200 lumen LED that could cut through even the darkest water, and clipped it to his BCD. With practiced efficiency, they both rolled backward into the Atlantic. The water embraced Marcus like an old friend, cool and buoyant. He gave the OK signal to Alicia, who returned it before pointing downward. They began their descent, following the anchor line that disappeared into the depths below. The first 30 feet were typical Florida Keys diving, patches of coral, schools of yellowtail snapper, and the occasional barracuda hanging motionless in the water column. But as they approached 60 feet, the topography changed dramatically. The seafloor suddenly dropped away, revealing the mouth of the blue hole, a dark, almost perfectly circular opening in the ocean floor. Alicia paused at the edge, gesturing for Marcus to illuminate the entrance with his light. The beam cut through the water, revealing walls of limestone that plunged straight down into darkness. Even for someone with Marcus's experience, there was something primally unsettling about hovering at the edge of such an abyss. Alicia made a series of hand signals indicating she wanted to take some readings before they entered. Marcus nodded, maintaining his position as she unclipped her monitoring device and activated it. The small LED screen glowed green in the otherwise blue world as it recorded water temperature, salinity, and other data points Marcus couldn't discern. After about 2 minutes, she signaled they were good to proceed. They began their descent into the blue hole proper, the walls of the sinkhole closing around them like the throat of some ancient creature. The water grew noticeably cooler as they passed through a thermocline at around 90 feet, the temperature dropping nearly 10 degrees in the span of just a few feet. The blue hole wasn't particularly wide, perhaps 50 feet in diameter at its entrance, narrowing as it descended. Unlike ocean dives with their endless blue horizons, diving in the blue hole created a sense of enclosure, of being swallowed by the earth itself. The limestone walls were mostly bare, occasionally broken by small crevices and ledges where hardy corals and sponges had managed to take hold. At 130 feet, they reached a shelf where the hole widened into a small cave system. This was where most recreational divers turned back, but Alicia pointed deeper, reminding Marcus of their planned depth. He checked his gauges. Gas supply good, no decompression limit still within acceptable parameters for the planned profile, and signaled his agreement to continue. As they descended past the shelf, the character of the blue hole changed again. The walls receded, opening into a larger chamber with a sandy bottom faintly visible in the beams of their lights. According to Marcus's depth gauge, they were now at 170 feet. The pressure at this depth was intense, compressing their wetsuits and creating that familiar squeeze that deep divers knew well. Alicia signaled for them to stop, pointing to a specific section of the wall where their current meter had been installed. She swam over to it, removing the data logger and replacing it with a fresh one from her equipment bag. Marcus provided light as she worked, sweeping his beam across the chamber to get a better sense of their surroundings. That's when he saw it. A flicker of movement at the edge of his light's reach, something large and grey, gliding effortlessly through a tunnel that connected to the main chamber. It was there for only a moment before disappearing back into the darkness, but Marcus instantly recognized the distinctive shape of a shark. He signaled to Alicia, who had just finished with the current meter. She looked in the direction he was pointing, but the tunnel was now empty. She made the shark signal, hand flat against her forehead like a dorsal fin, with a questioning look. Marcus nodded emphatically. Instead of showing concern, Alicia's eyes lit up with what looked like excitement. She quickly unclipped a different device from her belt, some kind of acoustic sensor, and activated it, pointing it toward the tunnel. She then made a series of hand signals that Marcus interpreted as, "Probably Matilda. Need to record. Stay here." Before Marcus could object, Alicia was swimming toward the tunnel, her light beam bouncing off the limestone walls. Professional. Curiosity overriding caution, Marcus thought, a combination that had gotten many a researcher into trouble over the years. He hesitated only briefly before following her, unwilling to break the cardinal rule of diving: never leave your buddy. The tunnel was wider than it had appeared from a distance, easily large enough for two divers to swim side by side. It extended horizontally for about 30 feet, before opening into another, smaller chamber. Alicia was already there, her light scanning the space as she held the acoustic device at the ready. The chamber was roughly circular, perhaps 30 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling and multiple smaller tunnels branching off in different directions. One of these, larger than the others, descended at a steep angle into darkness. It was from this tunnel that Marcus had glimpsed the shark. Alicia was positioned near the center of the chamber, slowly rotating as she recorded her surroundings with her underwater camera. She seemed oblivious to the potential danger. Focused entirely on her research, Marcus moved to join her, keeping his eyes trained on the larger tunnel. As he swam forward, his light beam caught something reflective on the chamber floor, a small metallic object half buried in the sand. Curious, Marcus descended slightly to investigate, keeping one eye on Alicia, who was now examining the ceiling of the chamber. The object was a dive knife, its blade dulled by exposure to salt water, but the handle still intact. Someone had lost it here, perhaps months or even years ago. Marcus was about to leave it when he noticed something else nearby, a blackened, corroded dive computer. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. The screen was cracked and long dead, the wristband deteriorated to the point of falling apart. It must have been down here for a considerable time. A sudden movement in his peripheral vision snapped Marcus's attention back to the descending tunnel. His light caught the unmistakable silhouette of a bull shark emerging from the darkness, grey-brown, stocky, with the characteristic blunt snout that gave the species its name. It was indeed large, easily 9 feet long, and moving with the deliberate, powerful grace that made sharks such perfect predators. Marcus froze, instinctively knowing that sudden movements could trigger a predatory response. He slowly raised his free hand to signal Alicia, who was still facing away from the tunnel. The shark continued to emerge, now fully visible at the mouth of the tunnel, its gill slits pulsing rhythmically as it seemed to assess the strange intruders in its domain. Alicia finally noticed Marcus's signal and turned, her body language instantly changing as she spotted the bull shark. She didn't panic. Her movements remained slow and controlled, but Marcus could see the recognition of danger in her posture. She slowly raised her camera, apparently unable to resist documenting the encounter. The shark, which Marcus assumed must be Matilda, continued its approach, circling the perimeter of the chamber in a wide arc. Its black eyes revealed nothing as it studied them, but its body language, the slightly lowered pectoral fins, the arched back, suggested caution rather than aggression. Marcus and Alicia instinctively moved closer together, back to back, as They tracked the shark's movements. This was standard procedure when encountering potentially dangerous marine life. Stay calm, maintain eye contact, present a unified front. Marcus had been in similar situations before with other shark species, though never at such depth and in such a confined space. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably no more than a minute, the shark completed its circle and paused at the entrance to the tunnel from which it had emerged. For a moment it hung there, suspended in the water, its powerful tail swaying gently to maintain position. Then, with a single powerful sweep of its tail, it turned and disappeared back into the darkness. Marcus felt Alicia tap his shoulder. When he turned, she made the signal to ascend, pointing upward emphatically. He nodded in agreement. While the encounter had ended peacefully, they had already reached their planned maximum depth, and the appearance of the shark changed the risk calculus of the dive. It was time to head back. They retraced their path through the connecting tunnel and back into the main chamber of the blue hole. As they began their ascent, Marcus noticed that the other divers were nowhere to be seen. They must have already started their ascent, or perhaps had never ventured this deep to begin with. At 130 feet, they made their first decompression stop as planned. Alicia used the opportunity to check her equipment and make notes on her underwater tablet. She seemed excited rather than frightened by the encounter, which didn't surprise Marcus. Marine biologists like her lived for such moments. As they continued their controlled ascent, making stops as required by their dive computers, Marcus found himself repeatedly glancing downward, half expecting to see the bull shark following them up from the depths. But the blue water below remained empty, the entrance to the deeper chamber now just a dark spot far beneath them. They reached the 30-foot decompression stop, where they would need to remain for nearly 15 minutes, according to Marcus's computer. The water here was noticeably warmer and brighter, the sun's rays penetrating to create shifting patterns of light on the limestone walls. Most of the other divers had likely already completed their safety stops and returned to the boat. Alicia tapped Marcus on the shoulder, pointing to her pressure gauge, which showed she was running lower on air than planned. This wasn't uncommon after an encounter that elevated heart rate and breathing. Marcus checked his own supply, still comfortable, and offered her his spare regulator connected to his stage bottle. She accepted with a nod, switching to his air supply for the remainder of their stop. With nothing to do but wait, Marcus found his mind replaying the encounter with the bull shark. There had been something almost deliberate about the way it had circled them, as if assessing rather than hunting. He'd encountered enough sharks over his diving career to recognize the difference between curiosity and predatory intent, and Matilda had shown more of the former than the latter. Still, bull sharks were known for their unpredictability and aggression. They were responsible for more attacks on humans in shallow waters than almost any other species. The minutes ticked by slowly, their bodies gradually releasing the nitrogen that had accumulated during the deep portion of their dive. At the 15-minute mark, Marcus's computer gave the clear signal, and they began their final ascent to the surface, maintaining a slow, controlled pace as they'd been trained. They broke the surface about 50 yards from the Seaseeker. Marcus removed his regulator, taking a deep breath of fresh air as he signaled to the boat. One of the crew spotted them and waved acknowledgement. "That was incredible," Alicia said, her eyes bright with excitement behind her mask. "I've been tracking Matilda for months, but this is the first time I've seen her in person." "Glad you enjoyed it," Marcus replied, slightly less enthusiastic. "But maybe next time give your buddy some warning before you decide to chase a bull shark into a cave." She had the good grace to look sheepish. "You're right, that was reckless. Professional excitement got the better of me. Thanks for backing me up down there." They began swimming toward the boat, their gear making it a slow process. As they approached, Marcus could see several faces peering over the side, obviously curious about why they were surfacing so far from the anchored boat. "Current. They must have picked up while we were down there," Marcus commented. Though something felt off about the situation, they should have ascended along the same line they'd descended, which would have brought them up right beside the boat. It was only when they were about 20 yards from the Seaseeker that Marcus realized what had happened. In their hurry to exit the deeper chamber after the shark encounter, they must have ascended using a different exit from the blue hole than the one they'd entered through. The sinkhole had multiple openings at its upper levels, and they'd inadvertently chosen one that led them away from the anchor line. Captain Rick was waiting for them at the stern, as they finally reached the boat. "You two had us worried," he said, helping first Alicia and then Marcus up the ladder. "You're the last ones up, and you surfaced way off our expected position." "Sorry about that," Marcus said, removing his fins once on deck. "We had a bit of an unexpected detour." "We saw Matilda," Alicia interjected, unable to contain her excitement as she pulled off her hood. "In the deepest chamber, exactly where the acoustic data suggested she might be denning." This caught the attention of the other divers, who gathered around as Alicia described their encounter. Marcus used the opportunity to begin disassembling his gear, suddenly feeling the fatigue that often followed an adrenaline surge. The missed sleep from the previous night wasn't helping either. "Lucky you didn't end up as shark food," commented one of the technical divers, a heavily tattooed man who introduced himself as Ray. "Bull sharks aren't exactly known for their friendly disposition." "Matilda showed no aggressive behavior," Alicia countered. "She was curious, maybe territorial, but not hunting." "This time," Ray said ominously. As the discussion continued, Marcus finished breaking down his equipment and secured it in his gear bag. His muscles ached from the exertion and tension of the dive, and all he wanted now was a hot shower and maybe a beer or two at the dockside bar. Captain Rick announced they'd be heading back to shore soon, as everyone was now accounted for and the scheduled dive time was complete. The crew began securing equipment and preparing for the return journey, while the divers exchanged stories about what they'd seen. The father-son pair from Pennsylvania had spotted a sea turtle near the entrance to the Blue Hole. The California couple had experienced equipment issues and cut their dive short. The technical divers had explored a different section of the hole entirely, finding what they believed to be a previously unmapped tunnel at around 160 feet. "You planning another dive tomorrow?" Alicia asked, sitting down beside Marcus as the boat's engines rumbled to life. "Hadn't really thought about it," he admitted. "This was sort of a spur-of-the-moment thing for me. I'm down in the Keys for a couple of weeks, trying to clear my head." "Well, if you're interested, I'll be going back to the Blue Hole day after tomorrow. After seeing Matilda, I need to adjust my research plan. Having an experienced buddy would be helpful." Marcus considered the offer. On one hand, the encounter with the bull shark had been unnerving, even for someone with his experience. On the other hand, there was something compelling about Alicia's research, and he had to admit he was curious about what else might be lurking in the deeper chambers of the Blue Hole. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Give me your number and I'll let you know tomorrow." They exchanged contact information as the Sea Seeker made its way back to Key Largo, the sun now high overhead, turning the water to a dazzling mosaic of blues and greens. By the time they reached the dock, most of the divers had already made plans for evening drinks at the local dive bar, a tradition as old as recreational diving itself. Marcus begged off, citing fatigue, and loaded his gear into his rented Jeep. As he drove back to his small beachfront rental cottage, his mind kept returning to the image of the bull shark emerging from the darkness of that descending tunnel. There had been something almost sentient in the way it regarded them, something that went beyond simple animal curiosity. After a quick shower, Marcus sat on the cottage's small porch with a cold beer, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. The events of the dive played on repeat in his mind, the discovery of the abandoned dive knife and computer, the appearance of the bull shark, the strange sensation during their ascent that something was not quite right. His phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "Data from today is fascinating. Acoustic signatures suggest Matilda isn't alone down there. Definitely going back. Hope you'll join." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, unsure how to respond. Despite his exhaustion, or perhaps because of it, he felt a nagging unease about the Blue Hole and what they'd experienced there. But there was also an undeniable pull, the same curiosity that had driven him to become a diver in the first place, the desire to see what lay beneath the surface, to venture where few others had gone. He finally texted back, "I'm in, but we stick together this time." Her response came almost immediately. "Deal. Meet at the marina. 7 a.m. sharp." With that settled, Marcus finished his beer and headed inside. He fell asleep almost instantly, his dreams filled with dark water and shadowy figures circling just beyond the reach of his light. The alarm blared at 5:30 a.m., jolting Marcus from a fitful sleep. He silenced it with a groan, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings of the rental cottage. Outside, the world was still dark, though a faint glow on the eastern horizon promised the approach of dawn. He sat up, rubbing his face. Despite having slept for nearly 10 hours, he felt unrested, his mind clouded by fragmented dreams he couldn't quite remember. Something about deep water, confined spaces, and a presence lurking just out of sight. Typical anxiety dreams for a diver, nothing unusual there. After a quick breakfast of toast and coffee, Marcus performed his pre-dive ritual of checking his equipment one final time. He inspected his regulator for signs of salt buildup or damage, tested his dive computer's battery, and examined his BCD for any leaks or worn straps. Everything was in order, just as it had been yesterday. This meticulous attention to gear had kept him alive through thousands of dives, many in far more challenging conditions than the Blue Hole. As he loaded his equipment into the Jeep, his phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. Slight change of plans. Meeting at dock at 6:30 instead of 7. Different boat today. Check your email for details. Sure enough, there was an email explaining that due to maintenance issues with the Seaseeker, they would be using a smaller charter boat called the Nautilus. The dive plan remained the same: a return to the Blue Hole to collect more data on Matilda and explore the chamber where they'd encountered her. Marcus arrived at the marina just as the sky was transitioning from black to a deep cobalt blue. The docks were quiet, with only a few early rising fishermen preparing their boats for the day ahead. He spotted the Nautilus at the far end, a 30-foot center console boat that looked more suited for sport fishing than diving. Alicia was already aboard, talking with a captain he didn't recognize. "Marcus," she called, waving him over. "Come meet Captain Mike. He's going to be taking us out today." Captain Mike was a weathered man in his 60s, with the permanently tanned and creased skin of someone who had spent decades under the Florida sun. He nodded in greeting as Marcus approached, continuing to prepare the boat for departure. "Thanks for coming," Alicia said, as Marcus handed his gear up to her. "I wasn't sure if you'd change your mind overnight." "Neither was I," Marcus admitted, climbing aboard. "But I'm curious about what else is down there. You mentioned acoustic signatures suggesting Matilda isn't alone." Alicia nodded, her expression turning serious. "The data from the sensors indicates at least 2 more large biological entities in the deeper chambers. Based on the movement patterns, they're almost certainly sharks, and given the location, likely more bull sharks." "A congregation point?" Marcus asked, helping her secure their gear. "Possibly. Bull sharks aren't typically social, but they do occasionally gather in specific areas, especially for mating or pupping. What makes this unusual is the location. A Blue Hole isn't their typical habitat." Captain Mike called for them to take their seats as he started the engines. Unlike the leisurely pace of the Seaseeker, the Nautilus accelerated quickly, cutting through the calm morning waters at nearly twice the speed. What had been a 45-minute journey the day before would take less than half that time today. As they sped toward the dive site, the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange and pink. Alicia used the time to brief Marcus on her modified research plan. "I want to place additional acoustic sensors in the chamber where we saw Matilda, and if possible in the tunnel she emerged from," she explained, raising her voice over the sound of the engines and rushing wind. "The data could help us understand why bull sharks are using this unusual habitat. It might be related to changes in their traditional territories due to climate shifts or human activity." "And if we encounter her again?" Marcus asked. "Standard protocol: maintain distance, avoid sudden movements, and retreat if she shows any aggressive behavior. I've brought a shark shield as a precaution." She patted a cylindrical device attached to her BCD. "It generates an electrical field that most sharks find unpleasant. Not foolproof, but better than nothing." The Nautilus slowed as they approached the coordinates of the Blue Hole. Captain Mike cut the engines, allowing the boat to drift to a stop over the dive site. The water here was remarkably clear, the darker circle of the Blue Hole's entrance visible even from the surface when the light hit just right. "I'll deploy." "The marker boys," Alicia said, moving to the side of the boat. "We should be right over the main entrance." Marcus began donning his gear: wetsuit, BCD, tanks, fins, and mask, going through his mental checklist as he did. "So, gas on?" "Check." "Computer functioning?" "Check." "Emergency signaling devices?" "Check." Everything was in order, yet he couldn't shake a vague sense of apprehension. "You okay?" Alicia asked, noticing his hesitation as she finished securing her own equipment. "Yeah, just going through the plan in my head," he replied, forcing a smile. "We're going straight to the chamber where we saw Matilda, right?" That's the idea. We'll descend through the main entrance, navigate to the tunnel that connects to the chamber, place the sensors, collect data, and ascend. Should take about 40 minutes of bottom time, plus decompression. And we stick together the whole time, Marcus reminded her. No solo excursions if we spot something interesting. Absolutely, she agreed. Buddy system strictly enforced. Captain Mike approached them as they prepared to enter the water. I'll be here when you get back. Expected duration. About 2 hours total, including decompression, Alicia replied. If we're not back in 3, call it in. The captain nodded, jotting down the information. Got your emergency beacon? Alicia patted a small device attached to her BCD. Right here, and we both have whistles and signal mirrors for surface communication. Good. Water looks calm, but there's a weather system moving in from the south. Nothing serious expected, but might kick up some waves later in the day. With final checks complete, Marcus and Alicia moved to the stern of the boat. They performed buddy checks on each other's equipment, a final safety measure before committing to the dive. Everything was in order. Ready? Alicia asked, securing her mask. Marcus nodded, pushing down the lingering unease. Let's do this. They entered the water one after another, the cool Atlantic embracing them as they descended beneath the surface. The visibility was even better than the previous day, easily exceeding 100 feet in the clear morning light. The entrance to the blue hole was directly below them, a perfect dark circle in the otherwise sandy bottom. They began their descent, following the outer wall of the sinkhole. Unlike yesterday's dive, they encountered no other divers. They had the blue hole entirely to themselves this morning. The thought wasn't as comforting as it might have been. At 90 feet, they passed through the same thermocline they'd experienced yesterday, the water temperature dropping noticeably. Marcus switched on his dive light as the ambient light diminished with depth. Below 100 feet, even on the clearest days, colors began to fade, the underwater world turning increasingly monochromatic. They reached the 130-foot shelf, where the hole widened, pausing briefly as Alicia checked her instruments and made notes on her tablet. Marcus scanned the surrounding area, half expecting to see the bull shark materialize from the darkness, but the water remained empty of large predators. Following Alicia's lead, they descended past the shelf, entering the larger chamber at 170 feet. The floor of the chamber was visible now, a mix of sand and limestone fragments. Alicia pointed toward the tunnel where they'd followed the shark the previous day, her hand signals asking if Marcus remembered the way. He nodded, taking the lead. The tunnel was as he remembered, wide enough for comfortable passage, extending horizontally before opening into the smaller circular chamber where they'd encountered Matilda. As they swam through, Marcus found himself repeatedly checking over his shoulder, an instinctive response to being in a confined space that limited escape options. They entered the circular chamber, which seemed smaller than Marcus recalled from the previous day. Alicia immediately began setting up her equipment, deploying a tripod for her camera, and retrieving the acoustic sensors from her research bag. Marcus provided light while scanning the chamber, paying particular attention to the descending tunnel, from which Matilda had emerged. There was no sign of the bull shark, but something else caught Marcus's attention: scratch marks on the limestone wall near the descending tunnel. Fresh marks from the look of them, where something rough had scraped against the soft stone. Shark skin, with its dermal denticles, was abrasive enough to leave such marks. He signaled to Alicia, pointing out the markings. She swam over, examining them closely before taking several photographs. She made a hand signal indicating recent activity and pointed emphatically at the descending tunnel. Her meaning was clear. She wanted to investigate. Marcus shook his head firmly, reminding her of their agreement to stick together. If they were going to check the tunnel, they would do so as a team, with proper caution. Alicia seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding in agreement. First, she finished placing her sensors around the chamber, 2 on opposite walls, and 1 aimed directly at the entrance to the descending tunnel. Each device was small, about the size of a soda can, with hydrophones capable of detecting and recording the unique acoustic signatures of large marine animals. With the sensors in place, they turned their attention to the descending tunnel. Marcus checked his gauges. They had been at depth for about 15 minutes now, with enough gas remaining for another 15 before they would need to begin their ascent. Adequate time for a brief exploration, but not for any extended investigation. Alicia made a series of hand signals. I go first, you follow. Maximum 5 minutes. Then we turn back. Marcus acknowledged the plan, albeit reluctantly. Every instinct told him the descending tunnel was dangerous, but his professional curiosity and his unwillingness to let Alicia go alone overrode his caution. Alicia switched her light to its highest setting and entered the tunnel, her fins stirring up. A small cloud of silt as she began her descent. Marcus followed close behind, maintaining a distance of about 5 feet, close enough to provide assistance if needed, but far enough to avoid collision if she stopped suddenly. The tunnel angled downward at about 45 degrees, continuing deeper into the earth. The limestone walls here were different, darker with visible striations suggesting this part of the formation was geologically distinct from the upper chambers. According to Marcus's depth gauge, they were now approaching 200 feet, well beyond the limits of recreational diving, and entering the realm where even minor mistakes could have fatal consequences. After descending another 20 feet, the tunnel leveled out and widened into yet another chamber, this one larger than the last. Marcus's light beam couldn't reach the far wall, suggesting it was at least 60 feet across. The floor was no longer sand, but a fine silt that billowed up in clouds at the slightest movement. Alicia paused at the entrance to this new chamber, waiting for Marcus to catch up. When he reached her, she pointed to her depth gauge, 215 feet, and then made the signal for 3 minutes before turning around. He nodded in agreement. They swam forward into the chamber, their light beams cutting through the darkness like solid things. The visibility here was reduced, partly due to the lack of ambient light at this depth, and partly due to a fine particulate matter suspended in the water, organic detritus drifting down from above. As they ventured further, the beams of their lights revealed something unexpected, a collection of objects scattered across the silty bottom. Man-made objects. There was a dive fin, its black rubber still relatively intact. A few feet away lay what appeared to be a crushed dive light, its housing cracked and its internal components exposed to the saltwater. And there, half buried in the silt, was a dive mask with a shattered faceplate. Alicia swam down for a closer look, her movements careful to avoid stirring up too much silt. Marcus followed, a growing sense of unease tightening his chest. This wasn't just random equipment lost by careless divers. This was the remnant of something more disturbing. As Alicia examined the mask, a movement at the periphery of Marcus's vision caught his attention. He swung his light toward it, but saw nothing but empty water. Then another flicker of movement, this time from a different direction. He rotated, trying to track whatever was moving in the darkness beyond the reach of his light. Alicia must have sensed his tension as she looked up from the mask and glanced in the direction he was facing. She made the "what is it" signal, but Marcus could only respond with the "I don't know" gesture. Then they both saw it. A large shape gliding through the water at the edge of their light beams. Not one shape, but two. Bull sharks, circling the perimeter of the chamber, just as Matilda had done the day before. But these sharks were behaving differently. Their movements were faster, more purposeful, less curious and more hunting. Marcus recognized the signs immediately: the lowered pectoral fins, the exaggerated swimming motion, the quick, sharp turns. These were classic pre-attack behaviors. He grabbed Alicia's arm, making the urgent, "We need to go" signal. She nodded, clearly recognizing the danger themselves. They began a careful retreat toward the tunnel entrance, moving slowly and deliberately, keeping their lights trained on the circling sharks. Direct eye contact often deterred predators, and the bright lights might discourage an attack. But at this depth, in this confined space, their options were severely limited. They were about halfway to the tunnel when one of the sharks, the larger of the two, easily 10 feet long, suddenly changed direction, swimming directly toward them. In the beam of Marcus's light, he could see the shark's mouth open slightly, exposing the first row of triangular teeth. Without hesitation, Alicia activated her shark shield. A faint electrical field surrounded them, invisible but apparently effective, as the approaching shark suddenly veered away, its body twisting as if it had encountered something unpleasant. The second shark maintained its distance, continuing to circle, but not approaching directly. Taking advantage of the momentary reprieve, they increased their pace toward the tunnel, now just 15 feet away. The larger shark had recovered from its encounter with the electrical field and was circling back, this time approaching from below, AEI's classic attack vector for bull sharks. Alicia reached the tunnel first, quickly entering and beginning the ascent. Marcus followed, keeping his light train behind him to monitor the sharks. The larger one followed them to the entrance of the tunnel, but didn't pursue further, perhaps deterred by the confined space or the lingering effect of the shark shield. They ascended the tunnel as quickly as safety allowed, conscious of the risk of rapid pressure changes, but equally aware of the danger below. When they reached the upper chamber at 170 feet, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but that relief was short-lived. Waiting for them in the upper chamber was another bull shark, Matilda, judging by the size and distinctive scar on her dorsal fin that Alicia had pointed out in her photos. Unlike the aggressive sharks below, Matilda maintained her distance, circling the perimeter of the chamber much as she had the day before. Alicia's shark shield was still active, creating a protective bubble around them, but Marcus knew its battery wouldn't last indefinitely. They needed to continue their ascent without delay. He signaled to Alicia, pointing toward the exit tunnel that would lead them back to the main chamber of the blue hole. As they swam toward the exit, Matilda's behavior changed. She stopped circling and began swimming directly across their path, not aggressively but deliberately, as if blocking their route. When they adjusted their direction, she moved again, maintaining her position between them and the exit. She's herding us, Marcus thought with a chill of realization. This wasn't random behavior. The bull shark was intentionally directing their movements, using the same techniques these predators employed when isolating prey in the wild. Alicia had evidently reached the same conclusion. She signaled to Marcus, pointing to an alternative exit, a smaller tunnel on the opposite side of the chamber that they hadn't used before. Marcus nodded, and they changed course, swimming toward this new exit. Surprisingly, Matilda didn't block this route. Instead, she continued to circle, watching as they entered the unfamiliar tunnel. It was narrower than the one they'd used previously, requiring them to swim single file. Alicia went first, with Marcus following closely behind, frequently glancing. Back to see if the bull shark was pursuing, she wasn't. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them through the limestone formation in what felt like a circuitous route. According to Marcus's depth gauge, they were gradually ascending, which was good, but he had no idea where this passage would ultimately lead them. The risk of getting lost in the underwater cave system was very real. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, the tunnel widened, opening into what appeared to be part of the main blue hole chamber. Marcus recognized the distinctive limestone shelf at the 130-foot level. They had found their way back to familiar territory. With no sign of the bull sharks, they began their standard ascent protocol, stopping at predetermined depths to allow their bodies to off-gas the nitrogen that had accumulated during their time at depth. The first stop was at 100 feet for 3 minutes, followed by 70 feet for 5 minutes, 50 feet for 8 minutes, and a final safety stop at 15 feet for 5 minutes. During these stops, Marcus kept a vigilant watch for any sign of the sharks, but the water remained clear. Alicia, despite the harrowing experience, was busy recording notes on her tablet, apparently determined to document every aspect of their encounter. When they finally began their final ascent from the 15-foot stop to the surface, Marcus felt a profound sense of relief. The dive had been far more dangerous than anticipated, and he was grateful they were both returning safely. But as they neared the surface, a new concern arose. The Nautilus was nowhere in sight. They broke the surface in what appeared to be open ocean, with no boat visible in any direction. The marker buoys they had deployed were gone, likely dragged away by the current that had strengthened considerably during their dive. The water, which had been calm when they descended, was now choppy with 2 to 3 foot swells, evidence of the approaching weather system Captain Mike had mentioned. "Where's the boat?" Alicia shouted over the sound of the waves, treading water as she removed her mask. "I don't know," Marcus replied, turning in a full circle to scan the horizon. "We might have surfaced away from the site. The current was stronger than expected." He inflated his BCD fully to maximize his buoyancy, then helped Alicia do the same. They were both experienced enough to know the drill in situations like this: stay together, conserve energy, use signaling devices, and wait for rescue. Alicia retrieved her whistle and began sounding the standard distress signal, 3 short blasts repeated at intervals. Marcus did the same, although he doubted the sound would carry far enough to be heard over the increasing wind and waves. "Try the emergency beacon," he suggested, gesturing to the device attached to her BCD. Alicia activated it, confirming the signal with a small blinking LED. The beacon would transmit their GPS coordinates to the Coast Guard, but emergency response would take time. In the meantime, they were alone in open water, with the knowledge that at least 3 bull sharks were in the vicinity. "Do you think the sharks will follow us to the surface?" Alicia asked, her scientific detachment momentarily giving way to very human concern. "Not likely," Marcus assured her, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. "Bull sharks can come to shallow water, even fresh water, but they typically hunt near the bottom. Out here in open ocean, they'd be out of their comfort zone." As if to mock his words, a dark shape broke the surface about 50 yards away, the unmistakable dorsal fin of a large shark cutting through the water before disappearing again beneath the waves. "Was that?" Alicia began. "Yeah," Marcus confirmed grimly. "One of them followed us up." The situation had just become significantly more dangerous. They were floating on the surface, the most vulnerable position for a human in shark-inhabited waters. Their dark wetsuits and the dangling fins could easily be mistaken for struggling prey from below. "The shark shield," Marcus said urgently. "Is it still active?" Alicia checked the device. "Battery's low, maybe 15 minutes of charge left." "Save it," he advised. "We'll activate it if the shark approaches directly." They continued treading water, watching anxiously for any sign of the shark, while periodically blowing their whistles and scanning the horizon for the Nautilus. The swells were growing larger, making it increasingly difficult to maintain visual contact with each other, let alone spot a dorsal fin in the distance. Then, like an answer to an unspoken prayer, Marcus heard the distant sound of an engine. He turned toward the noise, straining to see over the waves. There, perhaps a quarter-mile away, was the distinctive white hull of the Nautilus. "There!" he shouted, pointing. "The boat's coming!" Alicia saw it too, and began waving one arm over her head while continuing to blow her whistle. Marcus did the same, praying they'd be spotted before the bull shark decided to investigate further. The Nautilus changed course, turning directly toward them. They had been seen. Relief flooded through Marcus, temporarily overshadowing the exhaustion and tension of the past hour. But their ordeal wasn't over yet. As the boat approached, now just 100 yards away, the dark shape surfaced again, much closer this time, no more than 20 feet from their position. The bull shark was circling, its dorsal fin slicing through the water in an unmistakable hunting pattern. "Activate the shield," Marcus shouted, reaching for his dive knife. A woefully inadequate defense against a determined shark, but better than nothing. Alicia fumbled with the shark shield, her fingers clumsy with cold and adrenaline. The device came to life, its LED indicator showing the electrical field was active. The circling fin immediately changed direction, veering away from them. The shield was working, at least for now. The Nautilus was almost upon them, Captain Mike, visible at the helm as he maneuvered carefully alongside. A crew member Marcus hadn't noticed before stood at the gunwale, reaching out to help them aboard. "Hurry!" the crewman shouted. "There's a shark in the water." "No kidding," Marcus muttered, helping Alicia toward the boat first. She grabbed the crewman's outstretched hand and was hauled aboard with surprising strength. Marcus followed, awkward in his full gear but propelled by the urgent desire to be out of the water. As he was being pulled over the gunwale, something slammed into his left leg with tremendous force. Pain exploded through his calf as he felt the unmistakable sensation of teeth penetrating his wetsuit and flesh. The bull shark had returned, either driving through the weakening electrical field of the shark shield or attacking from a direction. It didn't cover. "It's got me!" Marcus shouted, clinging desperately to the crewman's hands as the shark's weight pulled him back toward the water. Captain Mike appeared at the gunwale, a gaff hook in his hands. With practiced precision, he drove the hook into the shark's gills, one of the few vulnerable areas on the animal's body. The bull shark released Marcus's leg instantly, thrashing violently before disappearing beneath the surface, trailing a cloud of dark blood. The crewman and Alicia dragged Marcus the rest of the way into the boat, where he collapsed on the deck, his wetsuit now saturated with his own blood. The pain was excruciating, a burning, tearing sensation that radiated from his calf throughout his entire leg. "First aid kit," Captain Mike barked, taking control of the situation. And get us back to shore full throttle." The crewman retrieved a large medical kit from a storage compartment, while Alicia helped Marcus remove his buoyancy compensator and tanks. When they cut away the leg of his wetsuit, the full extent of the damage became apparent, a semicircular pattern of deep puncture, wounds where the shark's teeth had sunk into his calf muscle. The bleeding was profuse but not arterial, a small mercy. "Pressure bandage," Captain Mike instructed, tossing rolls of gauze to Alicia. "Wrap it tight. We need to stop that bleeding." Alicia worked quickly, her scientific training apparently extending to emergency medical care. She applied pressure directly to the wounds, then wrapped Marcus's entire lower leg in layers of gauze, securing it with medical tape. "How bad is it?" Marcus asked through gritted teeth, not really wanting to hear the answer. "You've got about a dozen puncture wounds," Alicia replied honestly. "Looks like the shark got a good grip but didn't shake or tear. That probably saved your leg." The Nautilus was racing back toward Key Largo, bouncing over the increasingly rough seas at near maximum speed. Each impact sent fresh waves of pain through Marcus's leg, but he knew speed was essential. The bandages would only control the bleeding temporarily, and the risk of infection from a shark bite was extreme. Captain Mike was on the radio, calling ahead to the marina for an ambulance to meet them. "ETA 15 minutes, he reported. "How's he doing?" "Conscious and alert," Alicia replied. "Bleeding is controlled for now, but he needs a hospital." The next 15 minutes were a blur of pain and motion as the boat pounded through the waves. Marcus focused on his breathing, using techniques he'd learned in technical dive training to manage the pain and stave off shock. He was acutely aware of how fortunate he'd been. If the shark had attacked while they were still in the water, or if it had managed to drag him back in, the outcome would almost certainly have been fatal. The Nautilus finally reached the marina, where paramedics were waiting on the dock. The transfer from boat to dock to stretcher was agonizing, but Marcus remained conscious throughout, answering the paramedics' questions about his medical history and allergies as they loaded him into the ambulance. Alicia climbed in beside him, still in her wetsuit, her face pale with concern. "I'm coming with you," she said, in a tone that brooked no argument. The paramedics seemed to assume she was his diving partner, which was true, and possibly his romantic partner, which was not, but they didn't object to her presence. As the ambulance sped toward the nearest hospital in Homestead, about 30 miles north, one of the paramedics removed the makeshift pressure bandage to assess the wounds more thoroughly. His expression was grim as he cleaned the area with antiseptic solution. "You're going to need a lot of stitches," he told Marcus, "and probably some strong antibiotics. Shark bites are notorious for infection." "Tell me something I don't know," Marcus muttered, wincing as the antiseptic stung the open wounds. "Actually," the paramedic continued, "you're lucky. Bull shark, right? They have among the highest bite force of any shark species, up to 1,300 pounds per square inch. The fact that you still have your leg is pretty miraculous." "Fascinating," Marcus replied through clenched teeth, not feeling particularly lucky at the moment. Alicia, perhaps sensing his discomfort with the conversation, changed the subject. "Did you get any documentation of the sharks in the lower chamber before everything went sideways?" Despite the pain, Marcus couldn't help but smile at her unshakable focus on research. "Sorry, no. I was a bit preoccupied with not becoming shark food." "Understandable," she conceded. "Still, the data from the acoustic sensors should be valuable, and your first-hand account of their behavior is important. Happy to provide a full report once I'm not actively bleeding," he promised, his voice strained as the ambulance hit a pothole, sending a fresh jolt of pain through his leg. The paramedic administered morphine, and the rest of the journey passed in a hazy blur for Marcus. By the time they reached the hospital, the pain had receded to a dull throb, replaced by a floating detachment that made the efficient chaos of the emergency room seem almost amusing. Alicia stayed with him as doctors examined the wound, took x-rays to ensure no teeth had broken off in his leg, and began the process of cleaning and suturing the punctures. The surgeon, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, explained that he would need about 50 stitches total, both internal and external, and would be placed on a regimen of powerful antibiotics to prevent infection. "You'll be staying overnight for observation," she informed him. "Shark bite victims often develop complications, and we want to monitor your condition." Marcus nodded, too medicated to argue. As the surgical team prepped him for the procedure, Alicia stepped out to make some calls and change out of her wetsuit, promising to return once he was in a recovery room. The next several hours passed in a narcotic haze. Marcus vaguely remembered the procedure, the additional local anesthetic, the tugging sensation as the wounds were sutured, the discussions among the medical staff about the best approach for each puncture. At some point, he was moved to a private room where the sounds of the hospital became more muted, the lights dimmer. When he finally emerged fully from the anesthesia, it was evening. His left leg was elevated on pillows, heavily bandaged from knee to ankle. An IV dripped antibiotics and pain medication into his arm. The room was quiet except for the soft beep of a monitor and the muffled sounds of hospital activity in the corridor outside. Alicia was there, seated in a chair beside his bed, her attention focused on her laptop. She'd changed into civilian, clothes, jeans, and a University of Miami t-shirt, and had apparently been working while he slept. "Hey," he croaked, his throat dry from the anesthesia. She looked up, relief evident in her expression. "Hey yourself, how are you feeling?" "Like I went 10 rounds with a cheese grater," he replied, attempting to shift position and immediately regretting it as pain shot through his leg. "How long was I out?" "About 6 hours. The doctor said the procedure went well. No major muscle damage, no tendons or major blood vessels severed. You're officially one of the luckier shark attack survivors." "Lucky," Marcus repeated, not entirely convinced. "What about you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just processing everything. I've been documenting our experience while it's still fresh. The research community is going to be very interested in what we observed." 3 bull sharks denning together at unusual depth in a blue hole, Marcus summarized. "Yeah, I'd say that's noteworthy." "More than noteworthy," Alicia corrected, her scientific excitement returning. "It's unprecedented. Bull sharks are typically solitary hunters. To find 3 together in such an environment suggests behavior we haven't documented before, and the way they seem to coordinate, one blocking our exit, directing us toward the others." Marcus frowned, the implications sinking in through the haze of pain medication. "You think they were working together deliberately?" "I'm not claiming they have human-level cognition," she clarified, "but coordinated hunting behavior isn't unheard of in apex predators. Wolves do it. Killer whales do it. Why not sharks?" "Because sharks have brains the size of walnuts," Marcus countered, though without much conviction. He couldn't deny what he'd experienced, the deliberate way Matilda had blocked their exit, the aggressive behavior of the sharks in the lower chamber. Brain size isn't always correlated with complexity of behavior, Alicia argued, and bull sharks have demonstrated remarkable adaptability. They can live in fresh water as well as salt. They've been found thousands of miles up the Mississippi River. They've developed specialized hunting techniques for different prey. They're far more sophisticated than most people give them credit for. Before Marcus could respond, a nurse entered to check his vitals and adjust his medication. She explained that the doctor would see him in the morning and that he should expect to remain hospitalized for at least another day, possibly 2, depending on how the wounds looked and whether any signs of infection developed. After the nurse left, Alicia closed her laptop and stood. "I should let you rest. I'll come back tomorrow morning." "Wait," Marcus said, suddenly reluctant to be alone with his thoughts. "What about the dive operation? Have you talked to them?" "Captain Mike filed an incident report with the Coast Guard," she confirmed, "and I gave a statement to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. They're considering posting warnings about increased shark activity in the area, but honestly, I doubt anything more will come of it. Shark encounters are part of the risk of diving in these waters." "And the blue hole? Will they restrict access?" Alicia shook her head. "Unlikely. There's no legal mechanism to close off a natural formation in open water like that. They might recommend temporary avoidance, but enforcement would be impossible." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. The ocean remained one of the last truly wild places on Earth, largely beyond human control, despite our best efforts to tame it. "Get some rest," Alicia said, gathering her things. "I'll be back in the morning, and Marcus, thank you for today. I wouldn't have made it back without you." After she left, Marcus lay in the darkened hospital room, his mind replaying the events of the day. The descending tunnel, the sharks circling in the deep chamber, the frantic ascent, the attack. Each memory was vivid, almost hallucinatory in its clarity, perhaps enhanced by the pain medication flowing through his system. He thought about the artifacts they'd found on the chamber floor, the broken mask, the crushed dive light. Someone else had encountered those sharks before, and apparently hadn't been as fortunate as they were. He wondered if anyone had reported those divers missing, if their disappearance had ever been connected to the Blue Hole or its denizens. Outside, his window, the night sky over Homestead, was obscured by light pollution, the stars faint and few, so different from the infinite blackness of the deep water. Both were alien environments for humans, the space above and the depth below, places we could visit but never truly inhabit. Perhaps that was what had drawn him to diving in the first place, the challenge of venturing where he didn't belong, where his presence was always temporary and contingent. The morphine was making his thoughts drift, turning philosophical in the way that often happens at the boundary between wakefulness and sleep. His last coherent thought before succumbing to exhaustion was of the bull shark's eye as it had circled them, black, ancient, utterly lacking in mammalian expression, yet somehow conveying a primal intelligence that had evolved in the oceans. Long before humans walked the earth, morning arrived with the impersonal efficiency of hospital routine, a nurse checking vitals, a breakfast tray of unappetizing food, a shift change that brought new faces and repeated questions. Marcus's leg throbbed beneath the bandages, a dull, persistent ache that flared into sharp pain whenever he tried to move. The surgeon who had treated him, Dr. Patel, according to her name tag, arrived mid-morning to examine the wounds. She carefully removed the bandages, revealing the extent of the damage in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital room. The bull shark's bite had left a semicircular pattern of puncture wounds across his calf, each sutured with neat black stitches that stood in stark contrast to the angry red flesh surrounding them. Some of the deeper punctures had required drainage tubes, small plastic channels that protruded from his leg, collecting bloody fluid in attached reservoirs. "The good news is there's no sign of infection yet," Dr. Patel said, her tone professional, but kind. "The antibiotics seem to be doing their job. How's the pain?" "Manageable," Marcus replied, though excruciating might have been more accurate without the pain medication. "On a scale of 1 to 10? 6 when I'm still, 8 if I try to move." She nodded, making notes in his chart. "That's to be expected. The bull shark's teeth caused significant tissue trauma, though fortunately the muscle damage was relatively minimal. You'll need physical therapy once the wounds heal, but I expect a full recovery of function." "How long before I can dive again?" Marcus asked, then immediately wondered why that was his first concern. After yesterday's experience, a rational person might seriously reconsider their relationship with the ocean. Dr. Patel's expression suggested she was thinking the same thing. Optimistically, 2 to 3 months before the wounds are fully healed, and the tissue is strong enough to withstand pressure changes and exposure to salt water. But I'd recommend a longer break. Psychologically, shark attack survivors often— "I'm not most survivors," Marcus interrupted, more sharply than he'd intended. "Sorry, I just mean diving is what I do. It's been my life for over 20 years. "I understand," she said, though Marcus doubted she did. "Let's focus on healing these wounds first, then we can discuss return to activities." She reapplied fresh bandages, adjusted his antibiotics, and informed him that if all went well, he might be discharged the following day. As she was leaving, Alicia arrived, carrying a laptop bag and what smelled promisingly like real coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing him a large cup from a local cafe. "Hospital coffee is universally terrible." "You're a lifesaver," Marcus said gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. "Twice in 2 days, actually." Alicia pulled up a chair beside his bed. "How's the leg?" "Still attached, which is apparently the best-case scenario with bull shark attacks. Doctor says no infection so far." "That is good news," she hesitated, then continued. "Listen, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. I owe you an apology. My research enthusiasm put us both in danger. I should never have suggested exploring that lower tunnel." Marcus shook his head. "We both made that decision, and neither of us could have predicted what we found down there. Still, I feel responsible." She opened her laptop, turning the screen toward him. "I've been doing some research into the history of the Florida Blue Hole. There have been other incidents over the years, though nothing officially documented as a shark attack. 3 diving fatalities since 1990, all attributed to equipment failure or diver error. But what if they weren't accidents?" On the screen was a news article from 2015 about a missing diver, presumed dead after a solo expedition to the Blue Hole. The accompanying photo showed a smiling man in his 30s, holding diving gear. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. "You think they encountered the sharks," he said, "not a question. It's possible. The Blue Hole provides a perfect hunting ground, isolated, deep enough to discourage most recreational divers, with multiple entrance and exit points that could be used to trap prey." She scrolled to another article, this one from 2008. This diver's body was never recovered. His dive buddy reported that he disappeared inside the hole during their descent. Why wouldn't the buddy report a shark attack? Maybe he didn't see it happen, or maybe he did report it, but without evidence, authorities attributed the death to more common causes. Deep diving is inherently dangerous. It's easier to blame nitrogen narcosis or equipment failure than to propose that bull sharks have established a hunting territory in a popular dive site. Marcus thought about the broken equipment they'd found on the chamber floor. Those artifacts we saw weren't recent. They'd been down there a while. Exactly. Which suggests this behavior isn't new. These sharks, or their predecessors, may have been using the Blue Hole as a hunting ground for years. Alicia's expression was a mixture of scientific fascination and genuine concern. "I've already contacted colleagues at the Marine Science Department. We need to conduct a proper investigation." "You're going back down there?" Marcus couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "Not alone and not without proper precautions," she assured him. "We're talking about a team with specialized shark cages, possibly ROVs for the deeper sections. This could be a significant discovery in understanding bull shark behavior." Marcus stared at the ceiling, processing this information. Part of him wanted nothing more to do with the Blue Hole or its predatory inhabitants. But another part, the part that had driven him to explore underwater caves, shipwrecks, and other challenging environments for the past 2 decades, was undeniably intrigued. "I want in," he heard himself say. "Once I'm healed, if you're putting together a research expedition, I want to be part of it." Alicia looked surprised, then pleased. "Seriously? After what happened?" "Because of what happened," Marcus corrected. "I've got unfinished business with that hole and with Matilda." Before Alicia could respond, there was a knock at the door. A man in a Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission uniform entered, introducing himself as Officer James Rodriguez. "Mr. Reeves, I'm here to take your statement about yesterday's incident." For the next hour, Marcus recounted the events in detail: their descent into the Blue Hole, the discovery of the OE lower chamber, the encounter with the bull sharks, and finally the attack during their rescue. Officer Rodriguez took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but otherwise letting Marcus tell the story at his own pace. When Marcus finished, the officer reviewed his notes before speaking. "So, to be clear, you believe these sharks were deliberately hunting you, working together?" "I know how it sounds," Marcus acknowledged, "but yes, that's what it felt like, especially the way the first shark blocked our exit from the chamber." Officer Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Reeves, I've been with FWC for 15 years. I've investigated dozens of shark incidents in Florida waters. What you're describing, coordinated hunting behavior among bull sharks, has never been scientifically documented." "That doesn't mean it doesn't happen," Alicia interjected. "Many marine behaviors go undocumented simply because humans aren't present to observe them." "That may be true, Dr. Chen," the officer conceded, "but without evidence beyond your testimonies, this will be recorded as a standard shark encounter and attack. Bull sharks are known to be aggressive, and divers entering deep water environments assume certain risks." "There is evidence," Alicia countered. "My acoustic sensors are still in place in that chamber. They'll be recording any shark activity, and we both saw artifacts from previous divers on the chamber floor, people who may have encountered these same sharks." Officer Rodriguez made a note. "I'll include that in my report, but I should warn you, unless there's compelling evidence of unusual shark behavior that poses a specific public safety risk, it's unlikely that any official action will be taken regarding the Blue Hole. It's in federal waters outside state jurisdiction." After a few more questions, the officer thanked them for their time and left, promising to file his report by the end of the day. Marcus had the distinct impression that their account would be sanitized in the official record. Another case of experienced divers encountering one of Florida's known marine hazards, with no mention of coordinated hunting behavior or a potential pattern of attacks. That went about as expected, Alicia said once the door closed behind Officer Rodriguez. Without physical evidence, we're just two divers with a fantastic story. The sensors, Marcus reminded her. If they capture what we experienced, if they survive, and if we can retrieve them. Big ifs. She sighed, closing her laptop. But you're right. It's our best chance of validating what we saw. The rest of the day passed slowly. Alicia left in the afternoon to meet with her colleagues at the university about planning a research expedition to the Blue Hole. Marcus was left alone with hospital television and his thoughts, which continued to circle back to the events in the deep chamber and the moment of the attack. He kept replaying the sequence in his mind, the bull shark circling, the momentary retreat when the shark shield activated, then the sudden powerful attack just as he was being pulled into the boat. It was as if the shark had recognized its opportunity was disappearing and made a final desperate lunge. By evening, the pain in his leg had intensified, the earlier dose of medication wearing off. When the night nurse came to administer his next dose, Marcus asked about being discharged. Dr. Patel left orders for another evaluation in the morning, she informed him. If there's still no sign of infection, you'll likely be released tomorrow afternoon. And if there is infection, then you'll be staying with us a bit longer. She adjusted his IV. Shark bites are notorious for complications. Their mouths contain a remarkable variety of bacteria. That's why we're being cautious. After she left, Marcus tried to sleep, but his mind was too active, filled with images of dark water and circling predators. When he did finally drift off, his dreams were vivid and disturbing. He was back in the deep chamber, but this time alone, his light failing as shapes moved in the darkness around him, drawing closer with each passing moment. He woke with a start to find sunlight streaming through the window. Morning had arrived, and with it Dr. Patel for his evaluation. The news was positive. The wounds showed no signs of infection, his vital signs were stable, and he was cleared for discharge with a regimen of oral antibiotics and instructions for wound care. You'll need these, Dr. Patel said, handing him a prescription for pain medication, and you'll need to use these crutches for at least 2 weeks. No weight-bearing on that leg until the deeper punctures have started to heal. I've arranged for a physical therapy consultation next week. By noon, Marcus was dressed in clothes that Alicia had brought from his rental cottage, waiting in a wheelchair as hospital policy required for his discharge. The reality of his situation was setting in. He was facing weeks of recovery, unable to dive, barely able to walk, with a leg that felt like it had been through a meat grinder. Alicia arrived to drive him back to Key Largo, helping him into her car and stowing the crutches in the back seat. As they left the hospital parking lot, she updated him on her discussions with the university research team. They're interested but cautious, she reported. Funding for a full expedition would require more preliminary evidence. They've approved a small team to retrieve the acoustic sensors this weekend. If the data supports our observations, we could be looking at a more comprehensive study. This weekend? Marcus frowned. That seems rushed. Tropical storm forming in the Caribbean, Alicia explained. National Weather Service is projecting it could develop into a hurricane within the next week. If that happens, we could lose access to the site for weeks. Who's going down? 2 of our marine science graduate students with technical diving certification, plus a safety diver. They'll be using a shark cage for the sensor retrieval, taking no unnecessary risks. Marcus nodded, staring out the window as the suburban landscape of Homestead gave way to the more rural stretches of the overseas highway that connected the Florida mainland to the Keys. The familiar scenery, mangrove swamps, small islands, bridges spanning crystal blue water, seemed different now, overlaid with a new awareness of what lurked beneath the surface. You're quiet, Alicia observed after several miles of silence. Just thinking, Marcus replied, about what happens next. With the research? With everything. My leg, diving, those sharks. He shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, his bandaged leg propped awkwardly to minimize pressure. I keep replaying it in my mind. There was something deliberate about the whole thing, like we were being tested. Tested how? I don't know. Assessed. Evaluated as potential prey. He shook his head, aware of how it sounded. Sorry, the pain meds must be making me paranoid. But Alicia didn't dismiss his concerns. Actually, that's not inconsistent with predator behavior. Many predators, Lions, wolves, even great whites have been observed to test potential prey before committing to an attack. It's a risk assessment. Is this prey vulnerable? Is it worth the energy expenditure to hunt? And what was their conclusion about us? Based on the outcome? That you were worth attacking. She glanced at his bandaged leg. But not worth pursuing once you showed resistance. That's actually typical predator cost-benefit analysis. Great. So I passed the worth-biting test but failed the worth-eating assessment. Not sure if that's comforting or insulting. Alicia laughed, breaking the tension. Take it as a win. Most predators are fundamentally pragmatic. They want meals, not battles. They reached Key Largo by mid-afternoon. Alicia helped Marcus into his rental cottage, setting up his medications and making sure he could navigate the small space with his crutches. The cottage, which had seemed cozy when he arrived, now felt confining with his limited mobility. "Will you be okay on your own?" Alicia asked, concern evident in her voice. "I can stay if you need help." "I'll manage," Marcus assured her, lowering himself carefully onto the couch. "I've had worse injuries." This wasn't entirely true. The shark bite was arguably the most serious injury of his diving career, but he didn't want to impose on her further. "If you're sure. I need to head back to Miami to prepare for this weekend's retrieval operation, but I'll check in tomorrow, and I'm only an hour away if you need anything." After she left, Marcus sat in the quiet cottage, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. The events of the past 48 hours seemed almost dreamlike from this distance. The deep blue chambers, the circling sharks, the frantic ascent, the attack. Yet the throbbing pain in his leg was an inescapable reminder of the reality of what had happened. He reached for his phone, suddenly feeling the need to connect with someone outside the bubble of the past 2 days. He dialed Emma, his ex-wife, before he could reconsider. Despite their divorce 3 years ago, they had maintained a cordial relationship, checking in occasionally on major life events. She answered on the third ring. "Marcus, this is a surprise." "Hey, Em." He hesitated, unsure now why he'd called. "Is this a bad time?" "No, it's fine. I'm just at home grading papers." She was a high school English teacher in North Carolina now, where she'd moved after their divorce. "Is something wrong? You sound off." "I had an incident while diving," he said, the understatement almost making him laugh. "Bull shark decided to taste test my leg." "What?" Her voice shot up in concern. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine. Well, not fine, but alive and mostly intact. Just got out of the hospital. I'm at that rental cottage in Key Largo." "The one we used to stay at?" Emma's voice softened with recognition. "With the little dock and the hammock out back?" "That's the one." He felt a twinge of nostalgia, remembering happier times there. "Anyway, I guess I wanted to tell someone who'd understand the significance, that it could have been much worse," she finished for him, "that you're one of the lucky ones." "Yeah." Marcus was surprised at how easily she still read him even after years apart. "Exactly that. Do you need anything? I could come down if you need help. Spring break starts next week anyway." No, don't do that," he said quickly, though part of him was tempted to accept. "I'm managing. Just wanted to check in. Because of my message about getting remarried," she deduced. "Emma had always been perceptive. I wondered if that's why you were down there in the first place." Marcus didn't deny it. "Maybe partly. Needed some space to think. And instead you found a shark." Life has a way of putting things in perspective, doesn't it? They talked for another 20 minutes, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd always had. Emma told him about her fiancé, a physics teacher at her school, and their plans for a small wedding in the summer. Marcus shared more details about the shark encounter, careful to frame it as a random incident rather than the more disturbing experience he and Alicia suspected it to be. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt better, grounded by the connection to his past, to a life that had once been normal and predictable. Tomorrow he would need to contact his own employer, a commercial diving operation in Fort Lauderdale, to update them on his condition and likely absence for the next few months. But for now, with the pain medication dulling both his physical discomfort and his mental acuity, all he wanted was rest. He managed to hobble to the bedroom where he collapsed onto the bed, not bothering to undress beyond kicking off his one shoe. The ceiling fan whirred above him, its steady motion hypnotic. Outside he could hear the gentle lapping of waves against the dock, the occasional call of a seabird, the distant hum of a boat engine, the sounds of the Florida Keys that had always brought him peace. But now those sounds carried new associations. The water that had been his second home for 2 decades now held a threat that he couldn't unsee or unknow. Not just the random chance of a shark encounter that all divers acknowledged as a risk, but something more directed, more calculated. Predators that didn't just happen upon human prey, but potentially sought it out, used strategy to acquire it. As he drifted towards sleep, Marcus wondered if he would ever view the ocean the same way again, or if, like so many shark attack survivors, he would find himself permanently divided, drawn to the water that had defined his life, yet forever wary of what waited below the surface. His last conscious thought was of Matilda's eye, as she had circled them in the chamber, that black, unblinking orb that had regarded them not with malice but with something perhaps more disturbing: intelligence. The intelligence of a predator that had survived millions of years of evolution, perfecting its role in an ecosystem where humans were merely visitors and sometimes prey. The next 3 days passed in a haze of pain medication, boredom, and increasing cabin fever. Marcus's leg throbbed constantly, the wounds itching as they began the long process of healing. He split his time between sleeping, watching mindless television, and hobbling around the small cottage on his crutches, each movement an exercise in frustration for someone accustomed to an active lifestyle. Alicia called daily with updates on the planned retrieval expedition. The university had approved the operation, scheduled for Saturday morning tomorrow. The team was prepared, the equipment checked and rechecked, the dive plan reviewed by safety officers. If all went well, they would have the acoustic sensor data by tomorrow afternoon. "I wish I could be there," Marcus told her during their Friday call, gazing out the cottage window at the calm waters of the bay. In the distance, a pelican dove for fish, its precision a reminder of nature's efficient predators. "You'll be there for the next phase," Alicia assured him. "If these sensors captured what we experienced, there will definitely be a full research expedition. And we'll need experienced technical divers. If my leg heals properly," he reminded her, shifting uncomfortably on the couch. The pain was more manageable now, but the loss of independence gnawed at him. He'd had to arrange for grocery delivery, and even simple tasks like showering had become complicated multi-step processes. "It will," she said with confidence. "Dr. Patel's reputation is excellent. If she says you'll make a full recovery, you will." After they hung up, Marcus tried to occupy himself with a book, a technical manual on rebreather diving that had been on his reading list for months. But his mind kept wandering back to the blue hole, to the circling sharks, to the crushing pressure of teeth on his leg. The memory was still visceral, immediate in a way that made concentration impossible. By evening, restlessness drove him to the cottage's small back deck overlooking the water. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, reflected on the still surface of the bay. On impulse, Marcus reached for his phone and took a photo, then sent it to Emma with the caption, "View hasn't changed." Her reply came a few minutes later. "Neither has your tendency to seek dangerous waters. How's the leg?" "Hurts like hell," he texted back honestly. "But I'll live." "Good. The world needs stubborn old divers like you, even if they occasionally serve as shark snacks." He smiled at her teasing, appreciating the normalcy of their exchange. It was easy, after an experience like his, to forget that life continued its ordinary rhythms elsewhere. Students still needed their papers graded, sunsets still painted the sky, and ex-wives still knew exactly how to puncture your self-pity with well-aimed humor. As darkness fell, Marcus returned, inside, prepared a simple meal of canned soup and crackers, and took his evening dose of antibiotics and pain medication. The pills made him drowsy, and he was asleep by 9, his dreams once again filled with deep water and lurking shadows. He woke to the harsh buzzing of his phone. Disoriented, he fumbled for it in the darkness, the bedside clock showing 2:17 a.m. The caller ID displayed Alicia's name. "Hello?" he answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Marcus." Alicia's voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately set him on edge. "There's been an incident." He sat up, instantly alert. "What happened?" "The graduate student team went out early. They weren't supposed to dive until morning, but Trevor, one of the students, convinced the captain they could get a head start if they did a night dive." Her voice caught. "They're missing." "Missing how?" Marcus asked, though he already feared the answer. They descended about 3 hours ago, no sign of them since. The safety diver went down to the first chamber but couldn't find them. Coast Guard is on scene now. Marcus closed his eyes, his chest tight with a mixture of dread and a terrible sense of validation. They went to the lower chamber, didn't they? To retrieve the sensors. That was the plan. Alicia's professional composure was cracking now. Her voice strained. Marcus, I approved the expedition. I gave them the coordinates, the dive plan. This isn't your fault, he said firmly. You didn't authorize a night dive. No, but I told them about the sharks, about what we saw. Trevor was excited. Too excited. He specializes in predator behavior studies. I should have anticipated. He might take unnecessary risks. Marcus was already moving, awkwardly maneuvering out of bed and reaching for his crutches. Where are you now? At the marina in Key Largo. I drove down as soon as I got the call. Coast Guard Command Center. Is coordinating from here. I'm coming. The decision was instantaneous, though the logistics would be challenging. Give me the address, I'll get a taxi. Marcus, you can barely walk, Alicia protested. There's nothing you can do here. I can tell them exactly what we encountered. He counted. The layout of the chambers, the behavior of the sharks, details that might help them locate your students. She hesitated, then relented, giving him the address of the marina where the Coast Guard had established their temporary command post. After hanging up, Marcus dressed as quickly as his injured leg allowed, called for a taxi and gathered the few items he might need: pain medication, his dive log with notes from their Blue Hole expedition, and his dive computer, which still contained the profile data from that fateful dive. The taxi arrived within 20 minutes, the driver clearly surprised to be getting a fare at such an hour in the relatively quiet Key Largo. Marcus explained he needed to get to the marina urgently, offering a generous tip for speed. As they drove through the dark, empty streets, his mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. 3 divers missing in the Blue Hole. A night dive, when bull sharks were known to be more active, their hunting behavior enhanced by the cover of darkness. If they had descended to the lower chamber to retrieve Alicia's sensors, they would have entered the very heart of what he and Alicia now suspected was a shark hunting ground. The marina was a hub of activity despite the hour. Coast Guard vehicles, with flashing lights, illuminated the parking area, and personnel in uniform moved with purpose between boats, and a temporary command center set up in what appeared to be a dive shop office. Marcus paid the taxi driver and made his way awkwardly toward the building, his crutches sinking into the gravel of the parking lot. Alicia spotted him before he reached the door, rushing out to meet him. Her face was drawn with worry, her usual, composed demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. Any update? Marcus asked without preamble. She shook her head. Nothing yet. They've deployed divers and sonar, but no sign of them. It's been almost 4 hours since they descended. Given the planned dive profile and gas supply, that was well beyond concerning. It was approaching certainty of a catastrophic outcome. Standard emergency response training taught that the window for successful rescue of submerged victims was exceedingly narrow. Inside the command center, Coast Guard officers were coordinating search efforts via radio, with maps of the Blue Hole spread across tables. A Florida Fish and Wildlife officer, not Rodriguez but another official, was taking statements from the boat captain, who had transported the diving team. Alicia introduced Marcus to the Coast Guard lieutenant in charge of the operation, explaining that they had recently dived the same site and encountered the sharks that might be involved in the current situation. The lieutenant, a woman named Gomez with the weathered features of someone who had seen too many search and rescue operations end badly, listened attentively as Marcus described their experience. "So you believe these bull sharks are actively predatory toward divers?" she asked when he finished, her expression carefully neutral. "I believe they're territorial and coordinated," Marcus clarified. "Based on our encounter, they seem to use the lower chambers as a hunting ground, with different sharks playing different roles in the process. And why didn't this information make it into the official Fish and Wildlife report from your incident?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Alicia. "It was included in our statements. Whether it was taken seriously is another matter." Lieutenant Gomez nodded, unsurprised. Without evidence, extraordinary claims tend to get filtered out of official reports. But right now, I'm less concerned with bureaucratic filtering and more with finding these divers. If your assessment is correct, what's the most likely location they might be? Marcus pointed to the map of the Blue Hole. indicating the lower chamber where they had encountered the sharks. Here, if they were retrieving the acoustic sensors Dr. Chen placed, this is where they would have gone. The chamber has multiple exits. We used this one during our escape. He indicated a different tunnel than the one they had entered through. And if they encountered the sharks? The question hung in the air, its implication clear. Marcus chose his words carefully. Bull. Sharks are ambush predators. They often attack quickly with little warning. If these divers were surprised in an enclosed space like that chamber, he didn't need to finish. Everyone present understood the likely outcome. The radio crackled with a transmission from one of the search teams. Lieutenant Gomez moved away to respond, leaving Marcus and Alicia momentarily alone. "This is my fault," Alicia said quietly. "I pushed for this research. I placed those sensors, and Trevor made the decision to dive at night without proper authorization," Marcus reminded her. "We all make choices in this profession. We all know the risks. But I specifically told him about the sharks. You should have seen his face, like a kid being told there really is a monster under the bed. But instead of being scared, he wanted to meet it." Before Marcus could respond, Lieutenant Gomez returned, her expression grimmer than before. "We've got something," she said. "One of our divers found equipment at about 100 feet depth, near one of the exit tunnels from the main chamber. A dive fin and a camera." "Just one fin?" Alicia asked. "Just one," the lieutenant confirmed. "No sign of the divers themselves yet. We're concentrating the search on that area now." As the morning progressed, more evidence emerged, none of it encouraging. A torn wetsuit fragment, a severed air hose, a dive mask with a cracked faceplate, disturbingly similar to what Marcus and Alicia had seen on the floor of the deeper chamber. But no bodies, and no survivors. By noon, the operation had transitioned from rescue to recovery, the grim reality acknowledged in the shift of terminology and tactics. The Coast Guard expanded the search perimeter, using sonar to scan the seabed around the blue hole for any sign of the missing divers. The families had been notified, and university officials were en route. Marcus remained at the command center throughout, providing what insight he could, though it became increasingly clear that his expertise could do little to change the outcome. The bull sharks, if indeed they were responsible, had claimed more victims, and the blue hole had become their graveyard. As the afternoon wore on, exhaustion began to catch up with him. His leg throbbed mercilessly, the pain medication wearing off hours ago. Alicia, noticing his discomfort, insisted he return to his cottage to rest. "There's nothing more we can do here," she said, her voice hollow with the resignation of someone facing an irreversible tragedy. "The search will continue, but..." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what the silence meant. A Coast Guard officer drove Marcus back to his rental cottage, the mood somber. The beautiful day, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, perfect. Florida Keys weather seemed a mockery of the events unfolding offshore. Tourists lounged on beaches and cruised on rental boats, oblivious to the drama at the Blue Hole. Back at the cottage, Marcus collapsed onto the couch, physically and emotionally drained. He should take his medication, change his bandages, eat, something. All the self-care tasks Dr. Patel had emphasized for proper healing. Instead, he sat in silence, staring at the water visible through his window, its peaceful surface concealing the dangers beneath. His phone rang. Alicia again. "They've called off the active search," she reported, her voice flat. "Moving to intermittent patrols. They've recovered more equipment, including one of the tanks with tooth marks on the valve." "Tooth marks consistent with a bull shark?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes, the Fish and Wildlife Examiner confirmed it. They're finally taking the shark threat seriously, issuing warnings for the area. The Blue Hole will likely be marked as a hazardous dive site. Too late for Trevor and the others." "Yes." There was a long pause. "The university is convening a review panel. I'll probably be cited for inadequate risk assessment, maybe worse." "You didn't authorize the night dive," Marcus reminded her. "Again, no. But I created the conditions that made it tempting. I shared our experience, emphasized the scientific significance. To an ambitious graduate student, that's like waving a red flag." After they hung up, Marcus sat for a long time, processing everything that had happened. 3 lives lost to the same predators that had nearly claimed his. The same dark chamber that had almost become his tomb had become theirs. The coincidence was too precise to be random. Or perhaps it wasn't coincidence at all. Perhaps the bull. Sharks of the Blue Hole had learned that the strange creatures in black suits that occasionally entered their domain were not just intruders, but potential prey. Perhaps each successful hunt reinforced the behavior, teaching them strategies for the next encounter. It was a disturbing thought, not just for what it suggested about these particular sharks, but for what it implied about the natural world more broadly. Humans like to imagine themselves apart from and above nature's food chain, but incidents like this served as stark reminders of our vulnerability, of the fact that to some creatures we were simply meat. The pain in Marcus's leg seemed to intensify with these thoughts. The healing puncture wounds a physical connection to the predator that had marked him. He finally took his medication, the pills bitter on his tongue as he swallowed them dry. As the drugs began to take effect, dulling the pain and clouding his thoughts, Marcus found himself drifting between wakefulness and sleep. In this liminal state, his mind returned to the deep chamber of the Blue Hole, to the moment when the bull shark had emerged from the darkness, its approach deliberate, its purpose clear. He had survived where others had not. By chance, by skill, by the intervention of Captain Mike and his gaff hook, whatever the reason, Marcus had escaped with his life while Trevor and his teammates had not. The randomness of it should have been terrifying, but instead, it left him with a strange sense of purpose. The Blue Hole and its predators would continue to claim victims if left unchecked. The warnings issued by Fish and Wildlife would deter some, but not all. There would always be those drawn to the challenge, the mystery, the opportunity for discovery, people like Trevor, like Alicia, like Marcus himself. As he finally succumbed to sleep, Marcus made a decision. When his leg healed, he would return to the Blue Hole, not for research, not for sport, but to confront what waited in those deep chambers, to understand it, and perhaps to end the threat it posed. It was a decision born of pain medication and emotional exhaustion, one he might reconsider in the clear light of day. But in that moment, it felt like the only possible response to the tragedy that had unfolded. Dreams came again, of dark water, of circling predators, of teeth and blood and the desperate struggle for survival. But this time, in the dream, Marcus was not alone. Trevor was there, and the other missing divers, their faces obscured by dive masks but their fear palpable as the sharks closed in. He tried to warn them, to guide them toward an exit, but his voice made no sound in the water and they couldn't see him reaching out. He woke with a start, disoriented and sweating despite the cottage's air conditioning. Outside, the day had faded to evening. The water turned silver in the fading light. His phone showed 3 missed calls, one from Alicia, one from the hospital's physical therapy department, and one from an unknown number. There was also a text from Emma. Saw the news about missing divers near where you are. Please tell me you weren't involved. He texted back quickly. Not directly, friends of a friend, I'm safe, still recovering. Her response came almost immediately. Thank God, stay on land this time, please. If only it were that simple, Marcus thought. If only he could walk away from the ocean that had both defined his life and nearly ended it. But the pull remained, complicated now by a sense of responsibility, of unfinished business. The next few days unfolded with grim predictability. No sign of the missing divers was found, despite expanded search efforts. The Coast Guard officially classified the incident as a probable fatal shark attack, based on the recovered equipment and Marcus and Alicia's testimony about their prior encounter. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission issued an advisory for the Blue Hole, recommending divers avoid the site until further assessment could be completed. Alicia was placed on administrative leave pending the university's review of the incident. She called Marcus daily, alternating between professional detachment as she discussed the scientific implications and raw emotion as she processed her role in the tragedy. They've approved a research vessel with ROV capabilities, she informed him a week after the disappearance, going to conduct a thorough survey of the Blue Hole, including the lower chambers. If those bull sharks are still there, we'll document their behavior from a safe distance. When? Marcus asked. His interest immediately piqued. Not for several weeks. There's a lot of red tape now, given what happened. Every aspect of the operation has to be approved by multiple committees. Let me know when it happens, he said. I want to be there. Marcus, her voice held a note of concern, you need to focus on healing. And after what you've been through, No one would blame you if you wanted nothing more to do with the blue hole. I need to see this through, he replied simply, for myself and for Trevor and the others. The following weeks passed in a blur of monotony, punctuated by milestones in his recovery. The drainage tubes were removed from his leg. The stitches came out, leaving angry red scars where the bull shark's teeth had punctured his flesh. Physical therapy began, painful, frustrating sessions of rebuilding strength and flexibility in his damaged calf muscle. Through it all, Marcus remained fixated on the blue hole and what had happened there. He researched bull shark behavior, devouring scientific papers and speaking with experts in predator biology. He reviewed and refined his memories of the encounters, drawing detailed maps of the chambers and tunnels they had navigated, and he waited for Alicia's call about the research vessel. It came nearly a month after the disappearance. The university's research ship would deploy to the blue hole in 3 days, equipped with advanced ROVs capable of exploring the deepest chambers. The operation would be conducted entirely from the surface. No human divers would enter the water. I've arranged clearance for you to observe, Alicia told him. If you're up for it. I'll be there, Marcus promised, glancing down at his healing leg. He had progressed to walking with a cane now, the crutches set aside as his strength returned. The physical therapist had been impressed with his progress, attributing it to his overall fitness from years of diving. The day of the expedition dawned clear and calm, perfect conditions for marine operations. Marcus arrived at the university's research dock in Miami early, watching as technicians loaded equipment onto the 70-foot vessel named Poseidon's Wake. Among the gear were 2 ROVs, one larger unit equipped with multiple cameras and sampling tools, and a smaller, more maneuverable one designed for tight spaces. Alicia met him at the gangplank, her professional demeanor restored, though, with a new gravity that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," she said, helping him aboard. "Your first-hand knowledge will be invaluable for the ROV operators." The ship's captain, a weathered man with the quiet competence of someone who had spent a lifetime at sea, welcomed Marcus aboard and introduced him to the research team. 4 scientists specializing in marine biology and underwater geology, and 2 ROV technicians who would operate the remote vehicles. As they departed the harbor and headed south toward the Keys, Marcus found a seat on deck where he could rest his leg while observing the preparations. The ROV technicians were conducting final checks on their equipment, while the scientists reviewed the dive plan and objectives. "The primary goal is documentation," Alicia explained, sitting beside him. "We want to confirm the presence of the bull sharks in the lower chambers, record their behavior if possible, and map the entire complex. There's also a secondary search objective for any remains." Her voice caught slightly on the last word. "Do you think there's any chance they survived?" Marcus asked quietly. Alicia shook her head. "After this much time? No, but their families deserve closure if possible." The journey to the blue hole took just over 3 hours, the research vessel maintaining a steady pace through the calm waters. When they arrived, Marcus felt a chill of recognition as the captain announced they were positioning over the dive site. Somewhere below them, beneath hundreds of feet of water and limestone, was the chamber where he had nearly lost his life, where Trevor and his teammates had lost theirs. The ROV deployment was methodical and precise. The larger unit, called Hermes by the technicians, was lowered first, its tether carefully managed, as it descended toward the entrance of the blue hole. Multiple screens in the ship's lab displayed the feeds from its cameras, giving everyone aboard a detailed view of what it encountered. Marcus watched intently as the ROV navigated into the main chamber of the blue hole, its powerful lights illuminating the limestone walls and sandy bottom. The structure was exactly as he remembered, the entrance narrowing as it descended, the shelf at 130 feet, the larger chamber opening below. "We're approaching the tunnel where you encountered the first shark," the lead ROV operator informed, him guiding Hermes toward the passage Marcus had indicated on their maps. The tunnel appeared on screen, its entrance partly obscured by suspended particles that drifted in the water column. Hermes navigated carefully into the passage, its lights cutting through the darkness ahead. "Maintaining depth at 170 feet, the operator narrated. "Tunnel extends approximately 30 feet before opening into a secondary chamber, according to your account." Marcus hesitated,